This is part 2 of the Chapter 7 lectures, and we're just going to wrap up on the Calvin cycle, and then we are going to compare the C3, C4, and CAM photosynthesis, just different ways of that plants have of controlling the process of photosynthesis and dividing the steps, the light reactions, and the Calvin cycle reactions in different ways. So, but first, let's go back to the Calvin cycle and let's talk about the product of step 2, which is the reduction, carbon dioxide reduction step. And the product is called G3P. This is the whole purpose of the Calvin cycle, is to produce G3P, or glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, because G3P is a 3-carbon molecule, and it can be converted into glucose, which is a 6-carbon molecule, fructose, which is another 6-carbon molecule, and if you have glucose and fructose together, chemically combined, you get sucrose. G3P can be converted to fatty acids and glycerol to make plant oils. G3P can be converted to the polysaccharides, starch and cellulose, and G3P can even be converted into amino acids. So we always think about the product of photosynthesis being glucose, but you can see here that the real product is G3P, and G3P can be converted to all of these other chemicals and foods. G3P can be converted to glucose, which can then be converted to fructose, and glucose and fructose together can be used to produce sucrose, which is table sugar. And this occurs in the fruits, the leaves, and the seeds of a plant. G3P can be converted directly to fatty acids. G3P can be converted into amino acids. Glucose, which comes from G3P, can be converted to cellulose and to starch. So G3P is the immediate product of step 2, which is the reduction of carbon dioxide, or carbon dioxide reduction. But then 5 of those G3Ps go on to regenerate RUBP, and 1 out of every 6 goes on to produce one of these different food carbohydrates that we find in food. Okay. So other types of photosynthesis. C3 photosynthesis is what is carried out by the majority of plants. They use RUBP carboxylase to fix carbon dioxide to RUBP. This occurs in the mesophyll cells. The problem with that is that when plants are in hot, dry climates, the stomata will close to avoid losing water, to avoid water loss and wilting. And what happens is, while those stomata are closed, the oxygen that's produced in the light reaction builds up and starts combining with RUBP. That doesn't produce anything. Whenever oxygen combines with RUBP, that is not going to lead to the production of food for the plant. It's a wasteful reaction called photorespiration. It's just literally doesn't lead to the production of any food for the plant. It does not lead to the production of G3P. It's a wasteful reaction. So C4 plants solve the problem of photorespiration. Excuse me. They fix carbon dioxide to PEP, and that produces oxaloacetate, which is a 4-carbon molecule, and this avoids the photorespiration problem. Now, if the environment is cool and moist, a C4 plant can't compete with a C3 plant, but in hot, dry climates, C4 plants are better. So if we look at a C4 plant, The mesophyll, in comparison to a C3, this is how the mesophyll tissue looks in a C3 plant. You have a row of mesophyll cells, and then you have some that are scattered. But in the C4 plant, the mesophyll tissue is arranged in a bundle like this. And then the cells between the mesophyll tissue and then the vein of the plant, these cells are called bundle sheath cells. So the reaction that we were just talking about, where carbon dioxide combines with PEP and forms oxaloacetate, that occurs in these bundle sheath cells. Okay, so sorry, I said that wrong, and I don't want to re-record this. Let me just say that over again. In the mesophyll cells, this is where the reaction where carbon dioxide combines with PEP to form oxaloacetate, which is a 4-carbon, that's where the C4 comes from. Oxaloacetate is a 4-carbon molecule. That occurs here. And then in the bundle sheath cells, that is where the Calvin cycle reaction occurs, where the oxaloacetate, the C4 molecule, is broken down into carbon dioxide. It releases carbon dioxide. That carbon dioxide is converted to G3P in the step 2 called carbon dioxide reduction. So basically what you have is you have in the mesophyll cells, you have a reaction occurs that kind of puts the carbon dioxide on hold until it forms oxaloacetate, and it just kind of waits in the mesophyll cells. And then when the oxaloacetate is broken down, it releases that carbon dioxide again at a place in the leaf tissue, the bundle sheath cells, where there isn't any oxygen to compete with the carbon dioxide. Basically, it divides up the steps of the Calvin cycle by location in the leaf. Okay, so in this way, it prevents the wasteful reaction of oxygen building up when the stomata are closed and combining with RUBP. So where carbon dioxide is able to combine with RUBP is in the bundle sheath cells, and oxygen does not build up there. Corn is an example of a C4 plant. And then we have CAM plants. And CAM plants divide the components or divide up carbon fixation by time. So at night, the CAM plants carry out carbon dioxide fixation, and they form C4 molecules, which are stored in large vacuoles. Then, and this prevents oxygen from combining with RUBP, prevents that wasteful reaction. Then when it's daytime and NADPH and ATP are available because of the light reactions, the stomata are closed to conserve water. And during the daylight, when the stomata are closed, the C4 molecules release the carbon dioxide to the Calvin cycle, and that is when your G3P is produced. So that is when the carbon dioxide reduction occurs and produces G3P. So basically at night, the carbon dioxide forms the C4 molecule, and then during the day, the C4 molecule breaks down, carbon dioxide is released and allowed to form G3P. So it divides up the steps of the Calvin cycle by time, whereas the C4 plants divide it by location in the leaf tissue. So a CAM plant, an example of a CAM plant is a pineapple. All right, so where do we find these plants mostly? C4 plants are most adapted to areas that have high light intensities, very, very sunny, very high temperatures, hot, dry, limited rainfall. So a corn is an example of a C4 plant. C3 plants are better adapted to cold temperatures and high moisture. Most plants are C3 plants. And then can plants are better adapted to extreme aridity, which means really, really dry areas. So those are the different types of plants as far as the way that they carry out the Calvin cycle reactions. Can plants divide up the steps of the Calvin cycle into day and night, and then C4 plants divide the steps into different locations within the leaf tissue. So by location. And the problem that they are both designed to solve is the problem of photorespiration. Photorespiration is when oxygen rather than carbon dioxide combines with RUBP, and that will not produce food for the plant. That's a wasteful reaction called photorespiration.